What's up everyone, Phil coming at you with a brand new Magic the Gathering video, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the updates to my Chandra Fire of Kaladesh deck, post Zendika Rising and Commander Legends. Rather than going through the entire deck list, which if you would like to see that, let me know in the comments below. I'll definitely be able to do one for you. We're just going to go over the brand new cards that I've swapped out since the last time you guys saw the deck profile after I did it after Core Set 21. Not every card that's new in the deck is from either from Zendika Rising or Commander Legends, but there are a few cards along the way I've picked up that I feel would be great inclusions to the deck. If you do like this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel as well. You can check out the other versions of the deck, which I will put links to at the end of this video. Now that's out of the way, guys, let's jump into the changes. First card we're taking a look at is we have added in Fiery Confluence and we've taken out Gutter. Now, obviously we are playing a burn deck and Gutter seems like a ridiculous card to take out of a burn deck, but in testing the deck, and I play this deck a lot, it's probably my most played deck, and a lot of the play groups will probably definitely say that this is the deck, I would agree, this is the deck I play the most. Gutter never really comes up, and having a card that's as flexible as Fiery Confluence, sure it costs one more mana and it's not a body, but the flexibility of a card like Fiery Confluence, being able to choose we can choose the same effect more than once. We can either deal 1 damage to each creature, deal 2 damage to each opponent, or destroy target artifact. The fact that we can choose 3 and we can change the same effect more than once makes this a very, very flexible card that I would much rather have at my disposal than Gutter. Also, just from the Chandra spellbook, so we do get to add another flavor card to the deck, which I do really like. So that we've taken out Act on Impulse and we've added Valikute Awakening. Now, of course, it did hurt taking out Act on Impulse because it is a Chandra flavored card, and whilst Valikute Awakening isn't the same card, we do have other cards that do what Act on Impulse does better in the deck already, like, of course, Light Up the Stage. Valikute Awakening is an absolutely fantastic card. So it's a 3-drop instant that basically allows us to put any number of cards we want from our hand on the bottom of our library, and we draw that many cards +1. So Valikute Awakening is a really powerful wheel effect for ourselves at instant speed. Also replaces itself in the hand as we get to draw one card. It's also a modal double face card, so if we really need to, we can play it as a land. So definitely fantastic, fixes up our land problems if we have it, and also fixes up our hand, especially because the card's on the bottom of our library rather than in our graveyard. So we don't have to worry too much about getting our Elixir of Immortality to get those cards back. We can potentially draw them if we are able to shuffle our deck. Next card, we have Dualcaster Mage out, and we have Blood Moon in. Now again, as you can see probably with these changes, we are lowering the number of instant and sorcery copy effects that we have. Most of the time I play this deck, I more so rely on the Planeswalkers rather than the instants and sorceries that I do have. So we do have, I think we still have a little bit of copy in the deck, but nowhere near as much as we used to, because if you play too many cards that copy instants and sorceries in the deck like this, you're never going to be able to really do much. We've definitely put in a lot more of the copy Planeswalker, copy abilities, more so than spells. So Blood Moon, of course, very, very powerful card, turns all non-basic lands into mountains. Yes, we play a lot of non-basics in our deck, but most of the time, the only cards that this will really affect for us are like Maze of Ith and our Forge of Heroes, and Khan's Bastion. Forge of Heroes isn't super relevant. It's only when we cast our commander. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. We're happily to make that a mountain. Obviously, turning Khan's Bastion into a mountain can be a little bit of a deficit for us as we're not able to proliferate. But I guarantee you, Blood Moon is going to hurt our opponents a lot more than us. And of course, if you're up against lands matter decks, Blood Moon is an absolutely fantastic inclusion, and if you don't feel like using it, of course, you can just cycle it away or discard it. We have lots of ways to do that. Next up, we have taken out Jaya's Immolating Inferno, which is a flavor card because, of course, Jaya was Chandra's teacher, and we've actually put in Molten Disaster. Now, Molten Disaster is a much older card, coming from Future Sight, but it is such a much better card than Jaya's Immolating Inferno. They have the same cost, being 2 red and an X. One is a legendary sorcery, which means we do have to have a legendary permanent out in the field. Of course, our deck is full of planeswalkers, so it doesn't really matter. But Jaya's Immolating Inferno is only able to deal X damage to up to 3 targets. Molten Disaster is able to deal X damage to each creature without flying and each player. A much more versatile effect. Sure, it does hit us. However, if we are playing the deck correctly, we should have a lot more life than our opponents when we use this card anyway. What makes this card even better is it does have Kicker for red, which means when we play the Kicker cost, we get to cast this spell at split second, which means our opponents actually can't counter it. So I don't even believe they can take it off the stack with something like a Narset's Reversal. I might be wrong about that, but being able to play an instant kill spell that's going to burn everyone out of the game at split second is absolutely phenomenal, and that's why it is a much better card in our deck than Jaya's Immolating Inferno. Of course, I did put Immolating Jaya in there at one point instead of Jaya's Immolating Inferno, which is like a board wipe for all creatures and planeswalkers equal to the number of instant sorceries in our graveyard. Just Molten Disaster is just a much better card in the deck. Next card we have out is we have Increasing Vengeance is out of the deck, and we have Rings of Bright Earth in. Again, we removed another copy target instant sorcery spell. Increasing Vengeance is by no means a bad card. It is really strong in this deck, especially if you're able to play it from your graveyard with something like Past in Flames. But what are you going to copy? Like, sure, we'll just copy all our ritual spells and get a lot of red mana. Yes, that is a valid strategy, but Rings of Bright Earth is definitely a much more useful card in this deck. So, of course, it is a 3-drop artifact, but whenever we play Activate an ability, if it isn't a mana ability, we can pay 2, and if we do, we can copy that effect. This actually works with our Planeswalkers. So being able to utilize multiple effects of our Planeswalkers and getting as much value out of our Planeswalkers as possible is absolutely very imperative in this deck. The downside that I've seen a lot of the times I play this deck is I'll have a bunch of Planeswalkers on the field, have a bunch of mana, and then I won't be able to use any of the cards in my hand because they're not really relevant. So having something like Wings of Bright Earth to just float that extra mana into when we use our Planeswalker abilities can be absolutely fantastic. It doesn't count as an extra activation, so it doesn't really trigger our Carol Keep Disciples again, but being able to get multiple effects off our Chandras is always something that we want to see in this deck. The two other cards we swapped out were, we swapped out the Seeding Song for a Jeska's Will. Jeska's Will is an absolutely ridiculous card. It is a 3-drop sorcery that we choose one. If we control a commander as we cast the spell, we can choose both. We get to add 1 red to our mana pool for each card in target opponent's hand. Absolutely ridiculous for 3 mana. And exile the top 3 cards of our library, and we can play them as turn. So this is literally an Act on Impulse plus a ritual in the same spell. This card is absolutely ridiculous, and considering that we can easily get our commander out on turn 2 and flip her on turn 3, being even if we're lucky, we can play this on turn 3, or if we've played this on turn 4, we can straight ahead just go off and win the game. The amount of advantage that a card like Jeska's Will can actually give us is an absolute ridiculous amount. This is a must include in mono red decks, particularly for us, because being able to continue that impulse draw, charm draw kind of effect where we exile the top 3 cards of our library and ramping is absolutely fantastic. This is a must run in the deck. The last card we added to the deck is Valikute Expiration. It is a 3-drop enchantment with landfall. So whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, we get to exile the top card of our library. This is a mandatory, sorry. We may play the card as long as it remains exiled. And at the beginning of our end step, if there are any cards exiled with Valikute Expiration, we put them into their owner's graveyard, and then this deals damage to that much damage to each opponent. So a fantastic way to utilize Impulse Draw. Whenever we play a land, we get to exile a card. We don't lose the card. This card is fantastic. I think it's like the only Impulse Draw card where if we don't use the card, we don't lose the card forever. It goes to the graveyard, and we actually get to burn our opponents. This just sums up this deck perfectly. Being able to Impulse Draw from the top of our deck, put cards back to our graveyard at the end, and burn. This is a fantastic inclusion in the deck. This did swap out for Lance's Blasting Cannons. Canyons. I really didn't like that card because it was a mandatory exile at the beginning of each upkeep, and sure, it could turn into a land that was pretty useless, but a lot of the time I wasn't a huge fan of it, because if I remember right, Vance's Blasting Canyons was that you could cast the card. This card is play, so if you do have a way to play an extra land, or if someone's got cards out there like Rites of Flourishing, allowing you to play extra lands, you can take advantage of that. This is an absolutely fantastic card. But that is it for the new inclusions in the deck. I'm just going to go over 2 other cards I'm thinking of adding to the deck. If you guys have any suggestions about what I could remove, let me know. So the first card we're thinking of adding is Lithoform Engine. Now this is an absolutely ridiculous card. It's a 4-drop artifact that has 3 abilities. We can pay 2 tap to copy target activated or triggered ability. We may choose new targets for the copy, so we can copy our Planeswalker abilities. Pay 3 and tap it, and we can copy a target instant or sorcery spell. We can choose new targets, so this is very flexible in our deck because we can copy some of our ritual spells, and we can copy our walker abilities. And the last effect is we can copy a target permanent spell we control. So obviously we can't copy our Chandras because they are legendary, but we can copy cards like Carol Keep Disciples, Chandra's Ember Cat. There are so many really cool ways that we can actually utilize the Lithoform Engine to our advantage in this deck. It also gives us a place to sink all that extra mana we may have from ritual spells. So definitely thinking of adding this to the deck. I'm still looking at something to take out, but definitely this would be absolutely phenomenal in this deck. And the other card I'm thinking of adding is Obliterate. Yes, this card is absolutely disgusting and people hate this card. But it is an 8 mana sorcery that can't be countered, and it destroys all artifacts, creatures, and lands, and they can't be regenerated. Now, this basically scoops the end, it basically works out to be the end for all our opponents. What's interesting about this particular card is it doesn't destroy enchantments, so that's not really too much of an issue for us, but it doesn't destroy planeswalkers. So if we have a bunch of Chandras on the field and we play Obliterate, we can essentially just rely on our Chandras to end up winning the game for us. This is definitely a card I'm thinking of including. It brings a lot of hate into your play group, so you do have to be careful if you do want to add this to the deck. It's essentially like that Worldfire card. If Worldfire was legal, 100% I would play it in this deck. It doesn't, I'm pretty sure it doesn't destroy Planeswalkers either, and it sets everyone's life to 1, so we could ping them for some damage. Obliterate is an absolutely phenomenal card in this deck if you are willing to take the hate you're going to get from your play group for playing it. But of course, if you guys have any suggestions about what in the deck I could take out for those two cards, other than Chandra's, let me know in the comments below. If you do like this video, remember to give it a thumbs up, let me know, and consider taking out the previous versions of the deck, which I will put links to at the end of this video. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and I will catch you for the next video.